Hello everybody and welcome back to another EDH deck tech idea. Today I'm featuring Judith, Carnage Connoisseur. She's a 5 mana 3/4 and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one. That spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink, or create a 2/2 red imp creature token with when this creature dies it deals 2 damage to each opponent. We are going to play this deck as a Rakdos Spellslinger deck, where we want to clear the board with her first ability to give our spells Death Touch and Lifelink, which will also help stabilize us due to the lifelink. And then we will create an army of red imp creature tokens, which we will sacrifice to burn our opponents out. We are going to win by playing cards like Delayed Blast Fireball, a 3 mana instant, so it deals 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control, and if the spell was cast from exile, it deals 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. You are able to foretell this card by paying 2 generic mana and casting it later for 6 mana. Comet Storm, a 2 mana and X instant with multi-kicker for 1. And choose any target, then choose another target for each time the spell was kicked. Comet Storm deals X damage to each of them. Price of Progress, a 2 mana instant. Price of Progress deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. We are playing 2 colors in this deck, so it is not really necessary to play that many non-basic lands, and due to us being able to give the spell Death Touch and Lifelink will help us stabilize anyways. Risk Factor, a 3 mana instant. Target opponent may have Risk Factor deal 4 damage to them. If that player doesn't, you draw 3 cards. And it also has the Jumpstart mechanic, so you can cast it from your graveyard. Flame Rift, 2 mana sorcery. Flame Rift deals 4 damage to each player. Another really powerful card in this deck is Invoke Calamity, a 5 mana instant. You may cast up to 2 instant and or sorcery spells with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard and or hand without paying their mana costs. If those spells would be put into a graveyard, exile them instead. Exile Invoke Calamity. Especially her first line is very powerful, where we can give our spells Death Touch and Lifelink, which is why we will play cheap 1 damage spells to go for one-sided Boardwipes, so we clear the path for our imp army. For example, Skirring Sands, a 2 mana sorcery. It deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control and you scry 1. Misium Mortos, a 2 mana sorcery, deals 4 damage to target creature you don't control. You can also overload it for 6 mana total. Blazing Volley, a 1 mana sorcery, deals 1 damage to each creature your opponents control. Fiery Confluence, a 2 mana sorcery, choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Either it deals 1 damage to each creature, it deals 2 damage to each opponent, or you destroy target artifact. Especially Fiery Confluence is a very flexible spell in this deck, because you only need to choose the first mode once to kill all of your opponent's creatures if you give the spell Death Touch and Lifelink. So feel free to destroy 2 more additional Soul Rings with destroying target artifact twice. Tectonic Hazard, a 1 mana sorcery, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. And the Festivities, 1 mana sorcery, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. Once we have used one of her triggers to wipe the board, we can still sling more spells together to create an imp army. Those imps need to die to deal damage to our opponents, so we will sacrifice them into Phyrexian Altar, a 3 mana artifact. Sacrifice a creature at 1 mana of any color. Deadly Dispute, 2 mana instant, is an additional cost to cast a spell. Sacrifice an artifact or creature. Draw 2 cards and create a treasure token. Ashnod's Altar, 3 mana artifact. Sacrifice a creature to add 2 colorless. Village Rites, 1 mana instant, is an additional cost to cast a spell. Sacrifice a creature. You get to draw 2 cards. Nasty End, 2 mana instant, is an additional cost to cast a spell. Sacrifice a creature. Draw 2 cards. If the sacrificed creature was legendary, draw 3 cards instead. Altar of Dementia, a 2 mana artifact, and you can sacrifice a creature, so target player puts a number of cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power from the top of the library into their graveyard. Our board is not only going to consist out of Judith and a few imps, we will also play cards like Raphael, Fiendish Savior, a 5 mana 4/4 flying, and other demons, devils, imps and tieflings you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. This is especially powerful because the death trigger of those imp tokens says that they deal the damage to each opponent, and due to Raphael giving them lifelink, you'll be able to gain even more life. At the beginning of each end step, if a creature card was put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, create a 1/1 red devil creature token with, when this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. This deck is gaining us a bunch of life, so we also play Treasonous Ogre, a 4 mana 2/3 with Dethrone, but the most important thing is the second line, pay 3 life to add 1 red to your mana pool. You can play a bunch of powerful X spells in this deck, and once you've gained a bit of life with all of these life gain mechanics, you'll feel free to use your life as a resource, and Treasonous Ogre definitely helps with that. Tolwarki the Younger, a 5 mana 3/3 reach lifelink, and if another source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage +1 to that permanent or player instead. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Tolwarki the Younger deals 2 damage to any target. Bloodladder of Aklazos, a 4 mana 2/4 flying, and if an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. Ojer Axonial Deepest Might, a 4 mana 4/4 trample, and if a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Ojer Axonial's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to Ojer Axonial's power instead. Ojer Axonial is a win con on itself, and especially with all of those one-sided board wipes, he can deal a lot of damage. So if you're playing Judith, you should definitely bring Ojer Axonial along. Driftnod Carnage Dominus, a 5 mana 8/3, and if a creature dying caused the triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. You can pay 2 black Phyrexian and exile 3 creature cards from your graveyard to put an indestructible counter on Driftnod Carnage Dominus. If you have an imp army on the field, a sacrifice outlet, and then you are able to resolve Driftnod, it can be a game-changing card. You want to win more? You get it. Past in Flames, a 4 mana sorcery, and each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. You can also flash itself back for 5 mana. And this is what I have been saying earlier, that in this deck you want to sling a bunch of cheap spells together to either wipe the board and stabilize, or to create a red imp army to then swing for the win. A little bit earlier I've also been talking about gaining a bunch of life and then using Treasonous Ogre to generate a lot of mana, and one of the spells that we will use this for is definitely Crackle with Power, a 2 red and 3 X sorcery, and Crackle with Power deals 5 times X damage to each up to X targets. Crackle with Power is definitely the best spell that you can play if you have a lot of mana available, and this is what you're trying to achieve in this deck. Alright guys, these were a few cards that I will play in Judith Carnage Connoisseur. Let me know down in the comments below which cards you would add to the deck, which legendary creature I shall feature next, and then I would say, see you in the next one. Goodbye guys.